Every day, someone rewires your thoughts, not with force, but with suggestion, not with violence, but with precision. You scroll, you listen, you speak, and somewhere, unseen, a hand adjusts the strings. And you don't even feel the pull. Imagine this. You wake up one morning and pick up your phone. Before you can even blink, your attention has already been hijacked by colors, sounds, and faces chosen not by chance, but by design. Every gesture, every word, every emotion that flashes across that glowing screen has been calculated to shape what you desire, what you fear, what you believe. It feels like choice. But is it? We think manipulation is something done by villains, the cold-eyed liar, the charming sociopath, the politician who twists the truth. But manipulation doesn't always come with intent. Sometimes it's just the way minds meet. To manipulate is to mold, to shape the mental world of another person. And in some way, we all do it. Parents guiding children, lovers bending words to be understood, leaders framing visions to be followed. Control hides in the smallest gestures, in tone, in silence, in the timing of a reply. And the most dangerous kind of manipulation is the kind that doesn't look like manipulation at all. Somewhere right now, a conversation is unfolding, two people in a dimly lit room. One speaks softly, with eyes that seem to understand everything. The other begins to open up, not realizing that every nod, every question, every pause is engineered. Words become doors. Emotions become keys. And without ever being told what to do, they begin to do exactly what was wanted. That's the art, the elegance, the quiet science of psychological influence. And it raises a haunting question. If your thoughts can be shaped by others, are they ever truly your own? We like to believe the mind is sovereign, that within our skull lies a kingdom no one else can enter. But manipulation is the art of breaching that fortress without breaking the walls. It works not by overpowering your will, but by reprogramming how you will seize the world. Every ad, every confession, every carefully chosen phrase plants a seed. And once planted, that seed grows into something that feels like your idea, your decision, your truth. That's what makes manipulation so terrifyingly effective. It doesn't steal your freedom. It makes you give it away. Tick. Every second, micro decisions unfold in your mind. What to focus on, what to ignore, what to trust. And each of those micro decisions can be nudged, tilted, redirected. Psychologists call it choice architecture. Marketers call it persuasion. Politicians call it framing. But underneath it all, it's the same primal mechanism. Control disguised as care. There's a reason manipulation feels invisible, because it plays on the very machinery of perception. Your mind doesn't see reality. It interprets it. And whoever controls the lens controls the view. A gentle phrase can turn doubt into loyalty. A moment of silence can turn guilt into confession. A single glance can plant fear deep enough to last a lifetime. This is not fiction. It's biology. It's psychology. It's the invisible code written into every human interaction. Think about the last argument you lost. The last person who made you feel guilty without saying a word. The last time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Was that choice or choreography? Because manipulation rarely feels like pressure. It feels like connection, like being understood, finally, by someone who knows what you need, even before you do. But understanding can become control when it's used not to connect, but to steer. That's when empathy becomes a weapon. Humans evolved to synchronize. We mirror each other's emotions, voices, and even micro-movements. It's what allowed our ancestors to survive as tribes. But that same mechanism is the backdoor into your subconscious. If I mirror your tone, your language, your rhythm, your brain begins to trust me. If I then feed that trust with carefully framed stories, you'll open the gates wider. And soon, you won't be defending against me. You'll be defending for me. That's the paradox. Manipulation doesn't always break your defenses. It recruits them. Somewhere deep in the brain, in the amygdala, the emotional core, fear and trust play a constant tug of war. And manipulators, whether consciously or instinctively, learn how to pull those levers. They know when to trigger fear, to make you compliant, when to offer comfort, to make you stay, when to create confusion, so you cling to their clarity. And you'll tell yourself it's your decision. Because that's what the brain does. It rewrites the narrative to preserve the illusion of control. You've seen it before. In relationships where one partner shapes the other's reality until they no longer recognize themselves. In social movements that weaponize identity. In digital platforms that track your every click, not to understand you, but to predict you. Every system built to influence, from love to politics, operates on the same foundation. The mind is programmable. And once you learn the code, you can write over anyone's reality. But before you recoil, remember, this isn't just about others. It's about us. You manipulate too. Every smile that hides a motive, every omission of truth, every strategic, "I'm fine." Manipulation is the shadow of communication itself. Wherever there is persuasion, there is power. And wherever there is power, there is the temptation to use it. The question isn't whether manipulation exists. It's whether we can see it when it does. Imagine standing in a hall of mirrors, each reflection a slightly altered version of yourself. One smiles differently. One frowns. One seems more confident. As you stare, you begin to wonder, which one is you, and which one is the version someone wants you to believe in? That's the world we live in, a psychological funhouse where identity, influence, and control blur into one. You think you're holding the mirror, but what if the mirror is holding you? This is not a warning. It's an awakening. Because to understand manipulation is not to fear it. It's to see the invisible architecture of human behavior. It's to recognize the subtle fingerprints left behind in every thought that wasn't entirely yours. From the dopamine loops of social media to the emotional gaslighting of toxic love, from corporate storytelling to political theater, manipulation shapes not just what we do, but who we are becoming. And that is why this journey matters. In the next hour, we'll descend into the depths of the human mind, where biology meets deception, where empathy becomes leverage, and where truth bends under the weight of influence. You'll see how persuasion works, not just as a tactic, but as an instinct. You'll understand how emotional hijacking rewires the brain. You'll discover the mechanisms that make you trust, obey, and believe, often against your better judgment. And by the end, perhaps you'll see that the line between control and connection is thinner than you ever imagined. So take a breath. Let go of certainty. Because to understand manipulation, you must first accept that your mind is not entirely your own. Welcome to the dark psychology of manipulation. Welcome to the Mind Lab studio. We often think manipulation happens somewhere else, in dark rooms, behind screens, or within the minds of master deceivers. But the truth is, it lives much closer. It breathes in the space between you and the people you love. It hides in moments of silence, in words left unsaid, and in every little attempt to be seen, to be accepted, to be understood. Because deep down, manipulation isn't always born from cruelty. Sometimes it's born from need. The need to belong, the need to be loved, the need to not lose control in a world that constantly takes it from us. And that's where it becomes dangerous, when care and control blur into the same gesture. Think about someone you once trusted completely, maybe a friend, a lover, or a mentor. At first, every word they said felt true. They understood you. They made you feel special, chosen, different from the rest. You started opening up, your fears, your dreams, your guilt. And then, slowly, the shift began. A subtle guilt tripping here, a quiet judgment there. Suddenly, you were walking on eggshells without realizing when it began. That's how manipulation grows, not in shouts, but in whispers, not in threats, but in tenderness. The most effective manipulation doesn't push you away. It makes you want to stay. Human beings are wired for connection. Our brains are social organs, designed to attune, to empathize, to mirror. It's what allows us to love. But the same circuits that help us bond also make us vulnerable. We don't just feel others' emotions, we absorb them. When someone smiles, our neurons fire as if we were smiling too. When someone cries, our body reacts as though the pain were our own. That's what empathy is, the bridge between minds. But like any bridge, it can be crossed in both directions. Someone can walk across to reach you or to enter you. And once they're inside, they can start rearranging things. There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't even look like control. It looks like love. It sounds like concern. It feels like safety. The partner who says they worry when you go out, but what they really mean is they want to decide who you see. The friend who always helps you make choices, but somehow, every choice leads back to what they want. The mentor who praises you for your potential, but slowly teaches you to doubt your instincts, so you depend on their approval. These patterns don't appear overnight. They weave themselves quietly into the fabric of trust. By the time you notice the web, you've already learned to move within it. And yet, the tragedy is not just that others can manipulate us. It's that we can and do manipulate them. Not always with malice. Sometimes simply to be loved a little longer. To avoid rejection. To keep things the way they are. When you withhold the truth because you fear someone's reaction, that's control. When you flatter someone to get their approval, that's control. When you say, "I'm fine," just to make them feel guilty enough to ask again, that's control. We call it communication, but much of human interaction is just negotiation for emotional safety. In relationships, this becomes a kind of unspoken game, a dance of signals, silences, and subtle emotional trades. One person becomes the caretaker, the other the dependent. One plays strong to feel in control. The other plays weak to stay protected. Both believe they're acting out of love, but love that manipulates becomes a performance, not a connection. And still, we keep doing it. Because manipulation works. It gives results. It bends emotions the way logic can't. It's messy, human, and often unconscious. The truth is, most people who manipulate don't even know they're doing it. They just learned early on that the world listens more when you learn how to pull its strings. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were currency, where affection had to be earned, where silence meant danger. You learned to read every face, every shift in tone, every sigh that meant something was wrong. You learned how to adapt, how to say what others wanted to hear. That's where many manipulators are born, not in power, but in fear. The fear of being unseen. The fear of being powerless. Now think about the digital world, the invisible marketplace of attention. Every scroll, every click, every reaction is a signal. And someone, somewhere, is listening. Platforms are built to study human behavior at scale, to learn what makes you stop, what makes you feel, what makes you stay. The algorithms that shape your feed aren't just showing you content. They're training you. They reward outrage. They feed insecurity. They amplify desire. Until your very emotions become programmable loops in a system you can't see. You're not being forced. You're being nudged. That's what makes it brilliant and terrifying. Because when manipulation becomes systemic, it no longer feels like manipulation. It feels like life. It's in the workplace too. The boss who flatters to extract loyalty. The colleague who plants a seed of doubt about your confidence. The culture that sells family as a way to demand unpaid devotion. Manipulation often hides behind good intentions, behind words like team, trust, growth. It disguises hierarchy as harmony. And before long, you can't tell whether you're contributing or being controlled. Even leadership, at its core, walks a fine line between inspiration and manipulation. A great leader knows how to influence minds, but an ethical one knows when to stop. Most don't. And then there's politics, the grand theater of collective manipulation. Every slogan, every soundbite, every image is designed to bypass thought and trigger emotion. Fear, outrage, belonging. These are the levers that move nations. Because if you can make people feel something strongly enough, you don't need to convince them. They'll convince themselves. The most powerful manipulation doesn't fight logic. It replaces it. It tells you that emotion is truth, and once that seed takes root, reason becomes irrelevant. It's not about facts anymore. It's about identity. And that's how entire societies can be steered, not through lies, but through stories. Because stories are the most ancient form of control we've ever known. Every manipulation, personal, political, or digital, depends on the same invisible principle, your desire to be understood. Once someone mirrors your fear, your hope, or your belief, you open the door willingly. You let them in. And that's when they start to shape the narrative from the inside. We call this trust. But trust, in psychological terms, is vulnerability by consent. It's saying, I'll let you hold my mind for a moment. And most of us don't realize how easily that trust can be turned into leverage. There's a story of a woman named Maya. She met someone online, kind, attentive, emotionally intelligent. He listened when no one else did. He remembered everything she said. For months, he became her anchor. But slowly, the conversations began to change. He started planting doubts about her friends, her choices, her past. He'd say things like, I'm just worried about the people you surround yourself with, or you're so different when you're with them. And because she trusted him, she began to believe him. Her world shrank. Her identity blurred. Until one day, she realized she couldn't tell what thoughts were hers and what thoughts were his. He never raised his voice. He never threatened. He simply learned her emotional code and rewrote it. That's manipulation in its purest form, the gentle rewriting of another person's reality. We like to think awareness protects us, that if we know about manipulation, we can't be fooled. But knowledge alone isn't armor. Manipulation isn't an idea you can outthink. It's an experience that bypasses thought. It happens beneath awareness, in the emotional circuitry of the brain. It works on trust, fear, and the primal need for connection. And none of us are immune to that. Because being human means being influenceable. It means needing others to survive. And that dependence, that beautiful, necessary vulnerability, is exactly what manipulation feeds on. So the question isn't just, who is manipulating me? It's also, why do I let them? What need inside us keeps opening the door? The need for love? The fear of rejection? The comfort of certainty? Manipulation doesn't create those needs. It finds them, and it feeds them until we can't tell the difference between what we want and what we were taught to want. Maybe that's why manipulation feels so personal, because it's never just about control. It's about the longing to be seen, to be chosen, to be right. And sometimes, we'll let anyone hold the strings as long as they promise not to let go. In the next chapter, we'll look beneath the emotion, into the science itself, the mechanisms that make manipulation possible, the biology of trust, the psychology of obedience, the chemistry of influence that rewires us from the inside out. But before we go deeper, take a moment to notice something simple. The next time you say yes when you mean no. The next time someone's tone changes your mood. The next time an ad, a post, or a person makes you feel something so strong you can't look away. Ask yourself, was that feeling yours? Or was it placed there? Chapter 1. The Biology of Control. Every act of manipulation begins not in words, but in chemistry. Beneath the surface of persuasion and power lies a biological symphony. Neurotransmitters firing, hormones releasing, ancient survival systems waking from their evolutionary sleep. Because manipulation, at its core, is not a social phenomenon. It's a biological one. It is the exploitation of instincts that once kept us alive. When someone gains your trust, oxytocin is released in your brain, the same chemical that bonds mothers to children, lovers to each other. Oxytocin lowers fear and increases openness. It makes you feel safe. But safety also makes you suggestible. When you trust someone, your brain literally turns down its critical thinking circuits. You stop analyzing their intentions. You start absorbing them. And this is where control begins, not through domination, but through chemistry. Dopamine, the molecule of reward, is another crucial player. Every time someone gives you attention, validation, or affection, your brain releases a burst of dopamine. It feels good, so you seek it again. Over time, you start associating that person with pleasure, a biochemical conditioning loop. They become your dealer, and you become addicted to their approval. Then comes cortisol, the stress hormone. Manipulators often create tension and then release it, intentionally or not. A cycle of stress and relief keeps the brain hooked. It's the same mechanism that drives gambling and abusive relationships. You never know when the next reward will come, so you keep chasing it. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is one of the most powerful forms of control known to psychology. Even your body language responds to these invisible signals. When someone dominates a conversation, your posture changes, your tone softens, your heartbeat adjusts. It's your nervous system syncing to theirs, a process called limbic resonance. This is not metaphorical. It's measurable. Two people in emotional sync will show synchronized heart rhythms, mirrored facial muscles, and aligned brain waves. This means manipulation doesn't just happen to you. It happens through you. Your body becomes part of the dialogue. Every glance, every silence, every shift in tone carries biochemical consequences. And those consequences shape behavior long before the conscious mind can intervene. Control doesn't always feel like control. Sometimes it feels like belonging. But biology is only the foundation. The real power of manipulation comes from the stories built on top of it, the psychological architecture that tells you why to obey, why to please, why to stay. That takes us deeper into the hidden blueprints of influence. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Influence. If biology is the soil, psychology is the architecture. It's how manipulators build systems inside the mind, not through force, but through understanding. Every great manipulator, consciously or not, knows one truth. The human mind is predictably irrational. We crave shortcuts, mental heuristics, to simplify a chaotic world. And every shortcut can be hacked. Take reciprocity, for example. When someone gives you something, you feel an invisible obligation to give something back. It's an ancient survival mechanism. Tribes depended on it to survive. But today it's everywhere. A salesperson offers you a free sample. A person showers you with compliments. A brand gives you a discount code. It doesn't matter that the gesture is strategic. Your brain registers a debt. You begin to feel you owe them. Then there's consistency. Once you've said yes to something small, you're more likely to say yes to something larger. Manipulators exploit this through gradual escalation, small commitments that evolve into full compliance. It's why cults never start with extreme demands. They start with belonging, then loyalty, then sacrifice. The principle of social proof is another powerful lever. Humans look to others for cues on what's real, what's safe, what's true. The more people agree, the more we believe. Propaganda thrives on this. Repeat a message enough times, surround it with confident voices, and it becomes reality, regardless of its truth. But perhaps the most potent psychological mechanism is authority. Our brains are wired to obey perceived power. From childhood, we learn to equate authority with safety. In 1961, Psychologist Stanley Milgram demonstrated this brutally. Participants were instructed to administer electric shocks to another person, an actor, pretending to be in pain. Despite their distress, most participants continued delivering shocks when ordered by a researcher in a lab coat. They weren't sadistic. They were obedient. The authority symbol short-circuited moral judgment. And then comes scarcity, the illusion of rarity. The more something feels limited, the more we want it. Manipulators use this instinct to create urgency, dependence, and fear of loss. In love, it sounds like, "You'll never find someone like me." In marketing, it's "only two left in stock." Scarcity hijacks logic and replaces it with desperation. Each of these psychological principles is neutral by design. They evolved to help humans cooperate, survive, and build trust. But in the hands of someone who understands them, they become levers of control. Influence becomes weaponized. And once those levers are pulled, emotion becomes the battlefield. Chapter 3: The Emotional Hijack. Emotions are the steering wheel of the human mind. Whoever controls emotion controls direction. In neuroscience, there's a term called the amygdala hijack, when fear, anger, or desire override rational thought. In moments of emotional intensity, your brain reroutes decision-making away from logic and toward survival. Manipulators know this instinctively. They create emotional storms to make you react, not reflect. Fear is their favorite tool. Fear makes the mind tunnel-visioned. When afraid, your brain releases adrenaline and cortisol. You stop questioning. You start surviving. That's why political rhetoric often begins with threats, crime, outsiders, collapse. Once fear is installed, obedience follows. But guilt and love can be just as powerful. A manipulator might say, "After all I've done for you," triggering guilt, an emotion wired to maintain social bonds. Or they'll use affection to disarm you. The warmth of validation makes the sting of control invisible. This is the emotional paradox of manipulation. You can be controlled by those who love you most, precisely because they're the ones who can move you emotionally. Our emotions evolved as a communication system to tell us what's safe, what's dangerous, what matters. But when someone learns to mimic those signals, to mirror your fears, amplify your hopes, and shape your desires, emotion becomes the perfect disguise for control. Chapter 4: The Subtle Art of Persuasion. Not all manipulation feels dark. In fact, the most dangerous kind doesn't feel like manipulation at all. It feels like understanding. It feels like being seen. Persuasion is manipulation refined through empathy. It doesn't push or demand. It invites. It works not by fighting your beliefs, but by aligning with them. And that is what makes it so effective. When someone tries to change your mind directly, your brain defends itself. Psychologists call this reactance, the instinctive resistance to control. But persuasion sidesteps that defense. It makes you want to change your mind. It plants ideas that feel like your own. This is the art of subtle suggestion. A skilled persuader will mirror your language, your tone, even your rhythm of speech. This builds unconscious trust. Your brain interprets similarity as safety. Then they'll use framing, the way information is presented, to shape your interpretation. A problem can sound terrifying or trivial depending on how it's framed. 90% survival rate feels reassuring. 10% death rate feels terrifying. The data is the same. The impact is not. Persuasion also thrives on priming, exposing you to subtle cues that influence later behavior. In one study, people exposed to words related to politeness were less likely to interrupt others afterward. Another group, primed with rudeness, interrupted twice as often. None of them knew their behavior had been altered. Advertisers use this every day. Colors, sounds, and phrases trigger predictable responses. Red creates urgency. Blue conveys trust. Repetition breeds familiarity, and familiarity feels like truth. But the highest form of persuasion doesn't come from outside signals. It comes from inside stories. Persuaders understand that people don't act based on facts. They act based on identity. Change how someone sees themselves, and you change everything they do. This is what cults, brands, and ideologies all share. They don't just sell beliefs. They sell belonging. You're not buying a product. You're joining a movement. You're not supporting a cause. You're becoming part of something bigger. The manipulation isn't in the message. It's in the meaning. And persuasion becomes unstoppable when it stops feeling like persuasion. When the message aligns perfectly with your internal narrative, your fears, your hopes, your sense of self, resistance disappears. You no longer need to be convinced. You'll defend the idea yourself. That is the ultimate victory of the manipulator, when you become their advocate, when their words echo in your voice, when control feels like conviction. But there's one more layer to this, a darker, quieter truth that blurs the line between victim and manipulator. Because influence is not one-directional. It's reciprocal. Every mind that can be shaped can also shape. Every person who's been influenced learns how to influence in return. And that brings us to the final chapter. Part 4. Reflection, Awareness as Liberation. At some point in every life, there comes a quiet realization that the world is not as neutral as it seems. Every word you hear, every image you see, every choice you make has been touched by someone else's intention. You've been guided, nudged, shaped, influenced, often with care, sometimes with calculation. And yet, when you look deeper, you find that manipulation was never just out there. It was always also in here, in the way you respond, the way you interpret, the way you cling to the stories that make you feel safe. This is where the real journey begins, not in exposing others, but in seeing yourself clearly for the first time. Awareness is a strange kind of freedom. It doesn't remove the strings that pull at you. It simply lets you see them. And once you see them, they lose some of their power. You start to notice how effortlessly your emotions can be steered, how a tone of voice can alter your confidence, how approval can dictate your decisions, how silence from someone you love can feel like punishment. None of these are random. They're reflections of your wiring, the ancient machinery of attachment and fear, trust and belonging. To understand manipulation is to understand that you are both the puppet and the puppeteer. You are shaped by others, yes, but you also shape in return. Every reaction is an influence. Every word is a thread in the invisible network that connects human minds. So the goal is not to cut every string. It's to hold them consciously. Imagine you could pause time in the middle of a conversation, right after someone says something that makes your chest tighten. In that stillness, you could ask yourself, why did that move me? Was it truth or was it fear? Did I just agree because I believe it or because I didn't want to lose connection? These small moments of self-inquiry are the antidote to manipulation. They turn reaction into reflection. They give you back the space that manipulation tries to collapse. Because manipulation thrives in speed. It feeds on automatic emotion. It dies in awareness. There's a kind of power in slowing down. When you don't rush to defend, or to please, or to prove. When you simply observe your mind's movements like waves, rising, breaking, dissolving. The more you watch, the less you're ruled by them. The less you chase control, the freer you become. The truth is, control is an illusion. No one truly controls another. They only influence the probabilities of behavior. But influence needs a host, a mind that reacts without seeing. The moment you see, the game changes. A manipulator can only work in the dark. Awareness turns on the light. Think of every person who ever tried to control you. With guilt, with charm, with authority, with love. What gave them that power? It wasn't their words. It wasn't their strength. It was your need. Your need for approval, for love, for certainty, for belonging. When you learn to sit with that need, not reject it, not feed it, just see it, it loses its grip. Awareness isn't suppression. It's illumination. It means saying, I feel the pull to please right now. I feel the urge to defend. I feel the fear of being wrong. And then doing nothing, just watching. In that space of observation, you stop being manipulated because you are no longer reacting unconsciously. But awareness comes with another truth. Once you see how manipulation works, you start seeing how you use it too. Maybe subtly, maybe unintentionally, in the way you withhold affection to make a point, in the way you soften the truth to avoid discomfort, in the way you exaggerate pain to be understood. These are small manipulations, human, tender, forgivable, but they matter. Because every small act of unconscious control reinforces the very system that traps us. Awareness, then, is not just self-protection. It's responsibility. It means asking not only, who manipulates me, but also, whom do I manipulate? It means realizing that honesty and empathy are the only true forms of influence that free rather than bind. It means that to understand the mind is not to master others. It's to master your own clarity. There's a quiet kind of power in awareness, not loud, not aggressive, not performative. It's the power of transparency, the kind of strength that doesn't need to control. When you are deeply aware, you stop fighting for dominance. You no longer need to win. You simply see. And in that seeing, you become ungovernable, not untouchable, but unbound. In psychology, awareness is often described as metacognition, the ability to think about your thoughts. It sounds simple, but it's the essence of human freedom. The moment you can watch your thoughts instead of becoming them, you create distance between stimulus and response. And that distance, that tiny gap of consciousness, is where free will lives. That is the only place manipulation cannot reach. So awareness isn't just knowledge. It's rebellion, a quiet revolution against unconscious living. You begin to realize that the goal isn't to stop being influenced. That's impossible. The goal is to be conscious of how you're being influenced, to choose your influences, to let in what aligns with truth, and to gently close the door on what doesn't. Because the moment you choose what enters your mind, you reclaim authorship of your reality. You stop being a character in someone else's story and begin writing your own. That's the real escape from manipulation, not avoidance, but authorship. Awareness doesn't promise peace. It promises clarity. And clarity often hurts before it heals. You start to see how many relationships were built on unspoken control. How many of your decisions were guided by fear? How much of your identity was shaped by external approval? It's painful, but it's also liberating. Because in that pain lies the truth of self. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. So you start letting go, not of people, but of illusions. The illusion that you need to be understood to have worth. The illusion that control equals safety. The illusion that love means ownership. When those illusions fall away, what remains is simplicity, presence, awareness. That's where real strength begins, not in manipulation, but in clarity, not in control, but in consciousness. You begin to live differently. You listen, but you don't absorb every word as truth. You feel emotion, but you don't let it drive your every reaction. You see others' intentions and your own with a softness that comes from understanding rather than judgment. You start to notice that manipulation no longer works on you the same way. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You learn to pause, to breathe, to observe the pull instead of obeying it. And in that simple act of awareness, you took back the one thing every manipulator tries to steal, your attention. Because wherever your attention goes, energy follows. And when you own your attention, you own your life. In the end, the deepest truth about manipulation is this. It's not about others controlling you. It's about whether you're awake enough to see it. Whether you can stay aware in a world designed to keep you distracted, reactive, emotional. To be aware is to reclaim the mind, to stand at the center of the storm, untouched, watching the winds of influence pass through without pulling you away. That is liberation, not from people, but from programming, not from love, but from illusion. Part 5. Closure. The calm after the revelation. There's a silence that follows awareness, a kind of stillness that feels heavier than sound. After you've seen how deep manipulation runs, how it hides in affection, in fear, in the need to belong, there's a part of you that doesn't quite know how to return to normal. You start noticing it everywhere. In the phrasing of an ad, in a politician's smile, in the tone of someone asking for your agreement. And you realize how much of human life is built on invisible persuasion, how easily minds can be led when they're longing to be comforted. But awareness changes the way you see. Once you've looked behind the curtain, you can't be fooled by the performance. You begin to live differently. You start to listen for intention instead of tone. You begin to feel when someone is guiding your emotions instead of sharing theirs. You stop being so easily pulled. And yet, something softer happens too. You stop blaming so harshly. You understand that most people who manipulate aren't villains. They're afraid. They're lonely. They're trying to protect something fragile inside themselves. Maybe that's what manipulation really is, the language of fear disguised as control. When you see that, compassion replaces bitterness. You no longer need to hate those who tried to control you. You just no longer need to obey them. Awareness doesn't isolate you. It refines your connections. You start surrounding yourself with people who communicate instead of control, who listen without trying to win, who love without needing to own. Those relationships feel quieter, but real. They leave you lighter. Because manipulation always weighs you down. It makes you perform instead of exist. Awareness strips away the performance until what's left is something more raw, truth. And truth, though it can be uncomfortable, is the only place love can survive without control. You begin to understand that freedom isn't the absence of influence. It's the presence of awareness within it. You will always be influenced by something, by people, by culture, by memory, by desire. But when you see the influence, it loses the power to own you. You become a conscious participant instead of an unconscious target. That's what real mastery of the mind looks like. Not manipulation, not dominance, but clarity. The ability to see every emotional wave without drowning in it. The strength to listen to persuasion without losing your own voice. The courage to love without trying to control. Imagine, for a moment, walking through a crowd. Voices all around. Opinions, desires, emotions, each one reaching for you. You can feel the pull of them, every word, every glance, every digital whisper. But you keep walking, calm, grounded, aware. You're not cold. You're not detached. You're awake. And in that awareness, the world starts to look different. You realize that every human being you pass is both a manipulator and a manipulated, each one carrying their own fears, their own conditioning, their own need to feel significant. Suddenly, the chaos doesn't look like war. It looks like longing, the collective ache to be understood. And for the first time, you don't feel the need to fight it. You just understand it. And understanding is peace. The paradox of manipulation is that once you understand it deeply enough, it stops being dark. It becomes transparent, something you can see through. You stop reacting. You start responding. You begin to live with intention, not impulse. And slowly, the entire machinery of control, emotional, social, digital, loses its hold. It can still touch you, but it can't enter you. Because nothing can control a mind that observes itself. If manipulation is the art of control, then awareness is the art of release. Letting go of the need to win. Letting go of the need to convince. Letting go of the stories that keep you trapped in loops of validation and fear. Freedom begins the moment you stop trying to control others and stop allowing others to control you. It begins when you see how every thought is a choice and every emotion is a message, not a command. The world outside will keep pulling at your strings, but awareness allows you to watch the pull, to smile at it, and to keep your balance. That's not coldness. That's mastery. So if you've made it here, to the end of this journey, remember this. Every manipulation begins with emotion. Every freedom begins with awareness. And somewhere between those two, in that fragile, luminous space where feeling meets clarity, lies the essence of what it means to be human. To be influenceable, but not lost. To be connected, but not consumed. To be aware and still open. That's not just psychological evolution. That's spiritual maturity. In a world built on persuasion, awareness is rebellion. To see clearly is to be free. So stay awake. Stay curious. Stay conscious of the strings that move beneath your every emotion. And every time you feel pulled, pause. Look. Choose. Because the moment you choose, you're no longer controlled. You're creating. And creation, not control, is the highest form of power. You've been inside the Mind Lab studio. Until next time, stay aware of who's truly pulling the strings.